Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Brilliant Breakfast in aid of the Prince's Trust. Thank you so much for coming on. And I think there might be people just coming and going, but that's really, really lovely. So it's now 9:05 and we're off at 10 o'clock. So it's only a bit of your time, but I know you're going to be inspired by my fantastic guest speaker, Kate Bright. Before we kick off, I'd like to say first a couple of things. As we raised 500 quid. So that's just fantastic. 500 quid. For the Prince's Trust, and really that's all about women supporting women. So before we start, Amalia is going to show us a video by the founder, Anushka Ducasse, who was the owner of Links of London, if you remember that. So and she'll tell us a potted history about what this whole charity is all about. So over to you, Amalia.
Hello, my name is Anushka Ducasse. I'm the founder of the Brilliant Breakfast. Thank you so much for getting together this morning to help raise money for women supporting women for the Prince's Trust. Vulnerable young women who were already at risk have been hit the hardest. But I think the best way to understand what the Prince's Trust do is to watch the story of one of them.
The worst nights were the rainy nights, and I was living in squats or tent communities with people I didn't really know, and sleeping with a crowbar under my sleeping bag in case anything went wrong. Because the people that I was staying with were violent. Yeah, George was a really amazing person, a really good friend. Kind of the happiness and all of the bad. We had an argument, and before I got time to apologise or put it right, he was pushed in a fight and got hit by a truck. He got killed. The guilt of not forgiving him in time was pretty bad. My mental state wasn't strong enough for me to work, getting sucked into drugs and alcohol and just not really knowing how to deal with life. I started the team program. George was the next girl on it. I did it in his place. He kind of helped me even when he wasn't here anymore. I'm a lot happier in myself now. A lot more skilled, I guess, than I was before. I came on residential to Avon Gerald, which is how I found out about the place. It was nice just being in nature. I had a job opening. I applied and got the job. Prince's Trust gave me a grant to actually get equipment that I needed to do my job.
You were really lovely, but just like you just had so much stress. You were so much more relaxed, and now you're achieving your dream. So proud of you.
Going on Prince's Trust changed my life.
Did you know that 1.5 million young women have lost their income since the start of the pandemic? 35% of young mothers skip meals in order to make ends meet. And a staggering 57% of young women say that their mental health has worsened since the start of COVID. Those are startling statistics. And this year, the Prince's Trust urgently need money in order to help people like Daisy get back on her feet. It would be fantastic if you could help. Last year, together, we raised £329,000, just brilliant. But this year, we have an enormous target of £1 million. It's a lot of money, but we need a lot of help. Every penny we raise for the Prince's Trust will create real change for the young women who need it most. Thank you so much for listening. If you've already made a donation, thank you. And if you've yet to donate, anything, everything is so welcome. To make a donation, please go to thebrilliantbreakfast.co.uk.
Well, that was very, very sobering. And in this fast moving pace, I think there for the grace of God go I. Thank you once again for donating money. And I think what was so lovely was that even £5, you know, went to doing something very, very useful. So you have really, really helped, and you are changing lives this morning. So well done, girls and Jim. Right. Okay. So let's press on then. So I'd like to first of all welcome our guest speaker, the incredible Kate Bright. Hi, Kate, and thank you for giving up your time to do this. And she was introduced to me from my very, very dear friend, Rara Plumtra. And I'm not sure if Rara is here today, but certainly that's who introduced us. And why I chose or invited Kate was because she has an extraordinary story. And we know as women, we're always talking about a pale, stale and male environment. And you couldn't get more pale, stale and male than being a bodyguard or a security expert. And look at her, she's gorgeous. She's sort of like some sort of model. How can she be a close, wake up, how can she be a close support like that? So without further ado, I'd like to welcome you, Kate, and say hello to our lovely people this morning. Can you just give us to start with, oh yes, by the way, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and then Marley will monitor those, and then we can have those at the end. Is that okay? Is that all right with everyone? Just do this if you think it's okay. Yeah. Okay. Right, let's go. So Kate, can you give us a potted history, please, darling, including your growing up, so that young people can get a context for how you come to be where you are? That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Of course. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking time out of your busy days to listen to me going on about bodyguarding and things. I seem to spend a lot of my time talking about the security industry, and yeah, trying to sort of bash down some stereotypes is kind of what I've been doing for the last 6 years of growing my little business. This is also very special for me because I didn't realize until the other day the connection that I have within my family. We're talking about family businesses with the Prince's Trust, and my father, who was a Prince's Trust mentor for many years. So, and the fact that we've raised £500, which I think, as I was seeing on the screen, we've given one woman the tools to sort of go forward. Which I think, if you get anything out of this hour, other than that, we've done a great thing. So. I won't bore you too much with my history, but I think particularly for young people on here, I'm a really, really passionate, I'm very passionate about young people getting themselves into the world of work. And I'm passionate about the world of work because the world of work for me is now my passion. And it took me many, many, many years to sort of have that penny drop moment. So my growing up is actually quite sort of boring in relation, I would guess, to where the moment where I set up my business, and I feel like, you know, pandemic included, I'm actually living I'm very grateful every day that I'm living a life that is one where I get to protect people and I get to make a difference in the industry that I work in. But growing up for me was very much along the sort of same lines as maybe some of you here. Growing up in Sussex, I went to a state primary school. And I had the opportunity to, at 11, to go and do a music scholarship at a local girls' school. And a bit like Dick Van Dyke, I sort of took in 8 instruments, because growing up in a very sort of Irish, Bavarian, loud household, there were always sort of bits and bobs lying around, recorders and violins and ocarina, for anyone that doesn't know what an ocarina is. And I think they gave me a music scholarship because they wanted me to stop playing my instruments and get me out of the audition room. So I was really lucky to get a scholarship to Burgess Hill School for Girls. I really loved those years, but I never really had my thing. I loved languages, I loved learning. One of my teachers nicknamed me the furnace because I was just sort of eating up work. I was on the netball team. I think I realized what an opportunity that I had to actually learn and grow. And being in a girls' school was very different for me, growing up with 2 brothers and a sister. You know, I was used to sort of, you know, I think that's probably where I learned how to be a bodyguard, to be honest with you, to protect myself in that, or protect my siblings, as it turned out eventually. But yeah, so really then getting to Royal Holloway, all I did was I followed the things I really enjoyed doing. And at that time, it was languages, and I did a French degree. And throughout my sort of from 11 to 18, one thing I would say is that there's a sort of a history. If I look back at it now, and I was thinking about this last night as I was sort of thinking about what we were going to talk about today, failure has been a really big part of my potted history of my upbringing, really. I didn't get into any of the universities. I had 6 offers of university places, and I got 2 A's and a D at A level. So all of them said no thanks. So I went through clearing, which was awesome, and went to Royal Holloway as a result, which was amazing because I got to go to a French-speaking island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And then when I graduated, I got rejected from every single graduate training scheme, which led to me becoming a personal assistant and eventually then sort of going into the field that I now work in. So I guess I wanted to just open with the fact that I'm a massive fan of getting it wrong is getting it right. And I don't want anyone to go away from this thinking that I've had some sort of, beautifully sort of curated life. Far from it. I've embraced failure at every turn. So yeah, that's the sort of the context of me, Anita, really.
Thank you for that. So I watched your TEDx talk, and the title is Invisible Security. So can you tell us a little bit about what that means? What does invisible security mean? And how on earth did you become a close protection bodyguard? So
firstly, I'll say that getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, the TEDx talk that I did in 2018 was the most terrifying experience of my life. I hated every single moment of it. I can't even watch it back. I've never watched it back because it's so cringe. I want to eat my arm off. But it's the moment for me where I was saying at the start, these sort of like moments where you kind of realize that you're sort of going in the right direction. I didn't really know that it was going to be the thing that it was going to be. And I didn't really know much about the TED's sort of setup, if I'm really honest. And it was only in preparation for it. And not many people know, I only had 6 weeks. I was actually a fill-in. I had a phone call saying, hey, Brighty, one of the organizers said, would you stand in? You got 6 weeks to go. And I was like, everything about me was saying no. And this voice just said, yeah, sure, why not? And it was at a time where in 2018, I had 3 years of growing what is now the business of UMBRA. And the 15 years after Royal Holloway, when I finished university, as I said, I went and sort of became a PA. I was working with high net worth, high profile people for that entire 15 years prior to setting up the business. And so invisible security and talking about that in the TEDx talk was a reflection of the fact that in 2013, when I was working with one of the families that I worked for, they were hugely sort of high profile, wealthy. They had a lot of risk associated with them. A lot of people that perhaps would have, if they knew where and how and what they were doing, people of interest. And whether that's a sort of a kidnap and ransom threat, or whether that's simply from targeted crime, we had a security team around us at all times. And I was really inspired by managing and working alongside the security function. And it really, Anita, it was a totally chance discussion with the head of security in 2013. He said to me, you should be doing your more security training. You're managing us as a function. I went and did the bodyguard training. It sounds really abnormal, but at the time it was a totally normal thing to do. And suddenly being operational within the teams as a female operative, because I was boots on the ground for a number of years, and still am. When a client needs a female operative, I'll always step in so that they don't sort of think that they can't have that female kind of operative edge. I suddenly realized that women in this protective function, it's not about the brute force, it's actually the opposite. It's actually those sort of subtleties that you can bring, and also the sort of discreet nature with which you can do your job. So I wanted to do the TEDx talk because when I was asked, to sort of fill in, I thought this was the perfect moment to tell the world, or have something there online to say how passionate I am about the sort of protective industry, how useful diverse teams are in wider society. So I'm not just talking about the sort of rich and famous now. Security in general needs to look and feel like the society it protects. So, moving on now and post-pandemic, I'm a huge champion for the industry and a champion for diversity coming into the security industry. So we can break down some of these assumptions that, I'm pretty sure, in fact, I think I saw Erica on this call, most, if not all of you on this Zoom today could train in close protection and be very, very useful. We've got more demand than supply at the moment, particularly for female operatives. So maybe this is a sort of a recruitment Zoom now. Maybe I can sort of pick the future operatives. But yeah, that's kind of how it all came about, really, Anita. So for me, very logical, but it still, as I say, it sort of maybe sounds a little bit sort of strange, but hopefully that gives you some context.
Well, now you've given us context. I really want to know what you do exactly. So we're talking about this broad thing about security. So what do you do?
So close protection as a function, you mean?
Yeah, and what do you actually do? Yes.
So there are many different sort of methodologies, I would say, when you are physically protecting a client. It depends on where you are. So a lot of the close protection that I've done is within the UK, although I've traveled with clients overseas. And a lot of it is very much sort of planning. So the course itself I absolutely loved the course, because I don't know if anyone's got a sort of PA or personal assistant or EA background. You don't get many offers of continuous professional development when you are the right-hand person. So for me, I absolutely loved the fact that right from day one, I was sort of front of the class, new pencil case, hand up every time a question was asked, because for me, it was a really natural sort of logistical function. And protection through planning is the kind of key takeaway, I guess, from what actually close protection does. It's planning the A, the B, the plan C, the plan D, the plan E, so that you are preparing for, in every single case, changes which may affect a client's risk. So even if you think about it on a basic level, if I'm planning to get a client today from, let's say, Mayfair to Heathrow, if I don't take into consideration road closures, protests, then I'm going to have not just the late client, but potentially a route that isn't going to be the one that I wanted to go on, and potentially an unsafe route. All the way through to accompanying clients to, and being very discreet at places like restaurants, and in some cases with clients, young people, nightclubs, night venues, which is a really interesting experience, particularly when you are blending in and making sure that you are in the background, but there in case of, and stepping in case of a need to step in. So I would say the travel and the logistical parts of it were the things that I most enjoyed, and the most natural progression from a personal assistant background, because you're always preparing. The actual protective function, people sort of say, oh, you must be hard as nails. And yes, I grew up with two brothers, as I said, so that was probably good training. And yes, I did carry on some of the parts of the training which involve Israeli martial arts. And I would say, of anything I've ever done physically, I love a good physical challenge. I'm always doing, crazy sort of physical adventures with friends. The fact that I went on and did more Israeli martial arts, Krav Maga, I would say I really enjoyed that. And it's quite an extreme one. I mean, there's sort of definitely lower levels of self-defense that I think it's really useful for men and women to have a bit of an understanding of how to not just protect yourself, but along the lines of close protection, don't get in the scenarios in the first place. But if you do, here's some things that you may be able to use. And Israeli martial arts became that sort of, Krav Maga became something I really actually enjoyed, but it is very physical. And I remember my father saying on one occasion where I had a slight sort of black eye, and I was setting up the business at the time, and he said, I don't think that's going to work if you're sitting in front of clients with a black eye. So I keep that as a sort of, I do my little refresher courses and training and things. But as I say, huge fan of the fact that close protection, bodyguarding is not about rolling around on the floor, pinning someone to the floor. Because if you're doing that, who's looking after the person that you're protecting? So it's about previewing, pre-warning, making sure that you're reading a room, a lot of EQ, high EQ, low ego, I always say, because like in sort of setting up the business and working with more and more of the sort of male and female operatives, because we don't just work with female clients and we don't just work with female operatives. I think this is something that people often think about UMBRA. So I hope that, I don't even know if that answers your question.
It does indeed. Yeah. And I just wanted to say, so do you ever teach any of your clients some of the physical things of how to protect themselves? Does that ever come up in your, in your conversations?
So yeah, and actually more and more, I think that the sort of the events of this year and a lot of the more high profile sort of violence against women, also I would say cybercrime, because we think of physical security and digital security over there. Actually, what we do as a business is we we say you can't look at one without the other. So we're doing a lot more kind of roundtables. We're doing a virtual secure lifestyle tips session for a bank next Friday. And so, yeah, a lot more clients. In fact, one client messaged me the other day asking for somebody to just give his son a bit of a sort of a refresher because he's going to be traveling in South America. So people are sort of, I think this idea of physical protection, I always caveat it with, sure, but let's look at, you know, where he's going. Can we plan better so that he's not, you know, left at an airport without a pickup? Or can we, you know, if he wants to get the true backpack experience, are there ways that we can, you know, have GPS trackers and, you know, ways that he can have sort of access to medical evacuation if he needs it, and all that sort of planning, which goes into any number of our clients' trips. There is that sort of, we can't give you safety. I can't sit here and sell you being safe. You have to feel it, you know, safety is a peace of mind thing. But also, you know, the best projects that we work on are where clients are really bought into the fact that you're not just paying for a bodyguard and it's like, great, I can just go and be an idiot in a nightclub. If you're an idiot in a nightclub, you're still going to be putting yourself at risk, whether you've got 10 bodyguards there or no bodyguards there. So it's a really interesting time actually to be talking about security and what we can do to be and feel safe. And I think there's a lot of learning that I'm sort of trying to bring together what I'm calling like everyday security, so that we can kind of put these little deterrents around us so that we can have our little techniques for how we can feel a bit safer. Because, you know, we're all reeling from 18 months of our sort of safety nets being taken away. So I think there's a lot of feeling of safety and the sort of physical side of safety, which we're trying to bring together. But yeah, a lot more inbound inquiries about, you know, how we can sort of protect ourselves on a more day-to-day basis.
Thank you. Thank you. That's brilliant. That's fantastic. So I want to move on from that then, because that gives us an idea of your world and what you actually physically do. But this breakfast is all about empowering women and being an inspiration. So I'd like to just get us out of the sort of the security thing at the moment, and perhaps we can take a few questions around other things that matter to us as women in business, or women in the community, if I may. A lot of us that are on this call, and also some youngsters, there are some youngsters on this call as well. I think that where we feel we can make the biggest impact, probably in business, is having a seat at the board, you know. And for a lot of women, they just don't know where they might, whether it's a good place for them or not a good place. And I know you sit on quite a few boards. So can you tell us why you decided you wanted to? What you've been able to achieve at that, and if you've come up against any barriers or difficulties that you think, you know, that you could share with us that might help.
Sure. So what I would say is I've been exposed to the boardroom from a very young age. My father was growing his business while I was growing up, playing the piano at home to his business colleagues, you know, understanding and being sort of in the waiting rooms of various sort of meetings and board meetings that he was hosting. And then over the years, the sort of families and clients that I've worked for, I've literally physically been in the boardroom. So for me, it wasn't so much, and like my career, I didn't ever think I'm going to, you know, transform a sector. It's always been a very natural progression, very organic progression. But I suddenly started to realize that, particularly when I set up my business, that if you want to change things, I'd seen for 15 years before how people of influence and power, and in a good way, I've worked for some really amazing, positively proactive, high profile and wealthy people who use their wealth for good, you know, philanthropy, or to make big changes to society. And I guess my frustration came when I kind of thought that it had to be something that I did when I was sort of shuffling off the end of my career. And it was only because I had, and I have, amazing mentors. I can talk about mentors till I'm blue in the face, but the importance of people that bang your drum. And it was the Women on Boards setup that I started going to some of their webinars, and I was probably the youngest person in the room. And I'm glad to say now, increasingly, I'm not. But I realized that if I was going to make big change, I needed to get myself into the sort of in the board zone. And I realized I needed to sort of, you know, understand a bit more about it. But the best advice I've ever been given is an amazing woman called Colonel Lucy Giles. She was the first female commander of Sandhurst. And I sort of semi-stalked her when I was looking for different people to sort of help support me about 5-6 years ago. And we've become really, well, I think she's my friend, but she probably would say I'm just her stalker, but she's really supported me. And I remember saying to her that there was a board position going within the industry, the security industry regulator. And she said, just go for it. And I was like, well, and I was at the time, I was 39, now 43 in December. And she said, well, if you apply for it, what's the worst that can happen? You've done an application, you'll have known how to do a board application, which is slightly different, I would say, to any other application I've done before. It's a lot more about your sort of your skills and the things you've experienced. But every single person, again, on this Zoom could sit on a board tomorrow, because what I realized was I hadn't taken into consideration the work that I'd done with charities, sitting as a trustee, and suddenly actually this idea of sitting at the table of change became a little bit more sort of within my grasp. And I think I would say to anyone here that I'm hugely passionate about diverse, neurodiverse, but also diverse, reflective boardrooms. And whether it's sitting on the PTA or being a governor of your children's school, whether it's a passion that you have for a charity that you want to offer your time for, those are two really, really good ways that you can start to get your eye in, so that when you are applying, as I did, to within the public appointments team, you can start to pick out the things that you've done, and you can start to really translate those to where you can add challenge and scrutiny. And that's kind of what I have taken out of the last 3 years of my SIA board career, is that I'm only there to ask the stupid questions, really. And I do ask them a lot, because if I don't understand something and I'm of average intelligence, I'm pretty sure somebody else in that room won't understand that as well. And I have a real hatred of acronyms and jargon. I feel like acronyms and jargon, particularly what you imagine in security, I'm always that one that people want to sort of use the phonetic alphabet, and it's a really great efficient way of my call sign Kilo Bravo, KB, K Bright. But I do think that when you are working in an environment where it's too acronym heavy, a lot of people simply won't understand. It's not very accessible language. So I'm enjoying bringing that sort of accessibility, the difference in the way that I think, the experience that I've had growing a business alongside the security sector. That's led to me being asked to be on the Gender Advisory Committee for the British Army, a huge honour. Again, coming from the private sector, all I do there is ask the silly questions. Why don't women have body armour that fits them? Because if you think about it, a breastplate has to look different for a man and a woman, and there are higher incidences of injury for women when they're deployed, because bullets can get through holes that men don't have. So things like that, which I've learned, that if women are going to be able to sort of think of themselves as board ready, you don't have to get to an age, you don't have to get to an experience point, you don't even really have to get to a sort of executive sort of point in your career. I mean, I've completely rewritten the rules of how I've run the business in a sector that was very much, we do it this way. I've come in at it from a different perspective, doing it a different way. And actually, in a post-COVID world, you know what? We need more people that are prepared to say, I don't understand that, or could you just explain that a little bit more? Because no doubt you will be helping somebody else in any room, whether it's a boardroom, whether it's an executive room, whether it's a school where you're a governor, you will be helping somebody else to understand something. And it might be a mission critical thing that you are helping to sort of explain or give more context to. So yeah, I'm a huge fan. If anyone wants to connect to me, the public appointments team, this is my little plug for the public appointments team, they're always looking for people to nurture and talent to bring into the boardroom. All I'd say is you're not doing a public appointment for the money. It's definitely for the sort of experience, and also that that you're working alongside parts of government. So there's all sorts of sort of interesting parts to that. But if you Google public appointments vacancies, there's always a list of really fascinating entities that need people wherever you are in your career to start thinking about applying. And as I say, the application process, particularly if you have great mentors and people that can sort of put their name to you, then even, as I said, you know, the sort of getting it wrong is getting it right. I was perfectly prepared, as is a sort of theme of my life, to be rejected, you know, from that public appointment, and, you know, perhaps go again in 3 years with the Security Industry Authority. Couldn't believe it when I got an interview. And again, I thought, you know, this is just an absolute shambles. But, you know, they called me back for a second interview. And the interview process, when you're going for a sort of a board like this, there's all sorts of support that the public appointments team will give you, so that you're not setting yourself up for anything other than being yourself, talking about your experience, and crucially talking about what difference you can bring to any boardroom. So again, sorry, I probably massively.
I mean, that's really sound advice, and I think I'm very, very guilty, like most of us here, I expect. I don't really understand the jargon when I'm in a situation, and I'm always asking a stupid question. But you're right, if you're asking a stupid question, then someone else in there is thinking it too, and it's our job to ask the stupid questions, actually.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Thank you. We touched on mentorship, but so I think for me and many people here, we bang on about mentorship. So come on then, tell me about what's your philosophy around mentorship, and what have you done, and how have you found mentors? You know, where did you start?
So I have always had people that I've turned to for advice, and I think that's a really good sort of starting point. And reflecting back, I was doing a webinar with Lloyd's of London last week, and we were talking about this idea of reverse mentorship. I realized that over the years I've had people that, you know, or is it friends come for reasons and seasons. I've had various people over my sort of 20 odd years now working in sort of professional life that have helped either as ambassadors for me, what I'm doing, or guides. The power of, you know, people like my family, my father particularly, he was a machine tool engineer, always there with advice that I never really want to hear, but always sticks there in the back of my head. Whether it's people like Lucy, Colonel Lucy Giles, who have got sort of huge amounts of experience in different sectors. Cross-sector mentoring for me has been hugely important to get my head out of security or private clients, and to actually think that there's a world outside of it and learn from different sectors. Rebel ideas and black box thinking from Matthew's side have massively helped me in that respect, because I for too long was just thinking security, and actually I've learned so much from looking at, you know, the aviation industry and embracing failure. And failure in security is pretty, you know, out there, sort of, you know, the sort of negative sides of failure in security are unthinkable, but actually we've got to think about them, and we've got to actually embrace that sort of cross-sector understanding. And for me now, looking at the various options with the business, when people start talking about, oh, you know, what are you doing next with the business? And it's like, God, I've only just kind of survived and got over a pandemic. Can I just have, you know, a bit of time to breathe? But capital raising, investment, you know, I can't just sort of Google that. I've got to ask, you know, people that have been there and done it. So other female founders, particularly, who've become my mentors. But I do think that there's this idea of championing. And I think everybody on here, again, should be looking at a way that you can champion someone. And it's not about age. It's more about somebody that you really, already in your life, you don't need to look for this person, but who just needs a bit of a sort of a leg up, or a connecting the dots. And it's well within everybody's grasp here today to think of one person that they can do that for. And I tell you now, there's a young woman who I mentor from one of the security industry projects called Secure Futures. And 25 kids every year come from schools that qualify for free school meals. And she is 16 years old. We speak once a month. And this idea of reverse mentoring, I have learned more from her than she has probably gleaned from my sort of very slightly tired 42 and 3/4-year-old self. But she is incredible, completely different frame of reference, completely different sort of context of her growing up. And we are having the best time. And things like her application to go to university, she didn't think she was going to go to university, but I was helping her with her, what's that sort of form you write to go to university? You sort of write this whole big sort of essay. But what I would say is that if you are having an informal versus a formal mentor relationship, if it's formal, like the one I have with this young woman, We have fixed things that we try and stick to. So we talk every month. I have it as a calendar invite that rocks up. I do it on a Saturday because, as I said to her, look, I can be doing my nice walks around wherever I am, talking to you, because that's what works and fits in with my life. Does that work for you? Yes, it does, because actually I'm at school during the week. Brilliant. Every month come to me with something that you want me to help you with, or a thing, or a problem to solve, or a thing that you don't understand. And so each time we've got a bit of a framework for how we can how I can support her. And I use that same methodology with the people that, like it or lump it, are my mentors. And I know who I can go to about different things. And whenever I struggle with a to-do list, this is something that has only really hit me in the last 6 months. You know how we've all got loads of stuff on the to-do list, and there's stuff that we always go, oh yeah, it's been on there for ages. Actually, look at those things. There's at least 3 or 4 things that either somebody who mentors you, whether they like it or not, or somebody that you mentor, that you can say, actually, I've had these 4 things on my to-do list. I wonder why they're still there and I ignore them and they kind of flash out at me. But asking your mentors why you can't get over the hump of the things that have just been stagnating is a really good tip that I've just suddenly started. She says, looking down at her really long stagnant to-do list. But it's something that's really sort of hit me in recent months, that I'm the one that people come to for help, support, advice, guidance, whatever. But actually ask others to help you with the things that you're stuck on. And it's amazing what a different opinion does to sort of really help clear that backlog.
That's such great advice. Such great advice. I mean, you know, I'm doing it all the time. Like, I've got 20 things on my list. Why aren't I doing them? And Amalia's always saying, focus on the focus, mum, one thing at a time, you know. Yes, well, okay, moving on. So something that's very close to my heart, and something that I really, really try and get the women that I'm involved with to think about, like they've never thought about before, and that's legacy. We never, you know, it's a bloke thing mostly, you know, what's your legacy then, you know, whatever. Yep. But we never really talk about the word legacy. It's not in our vocabulary normally. And I've always, you know, I'm always saying to people that I coach, think about your legacy, because it's really important. You know, we're on the planet for 80 years. And, you know, what do you want to be known for? What difference do you want to make? What was your purpose? So can you tell us, and I'd love to know, what legacy is going to be important for you now you do this extraordinary work? What's your legacy going to be, Kate?
So it's a really interesting one, and I love the fact you framed that in the sort of from a gender perspective, because I've been asking a lot of my female founder network about this word recently. And I think COVID for me personally was a massive mortality check. It was this sort of, you know, I'm from Irish Bavarian workhorse tank upbringing. You know, you just kind of keep going. And I think legacy from a very personal sort of longevity point of view, I suddenly realized that, particularly as we were so busy during the sort of first and second lockdowns, that sustainability has become a really important part of my daily life. And certainly I talk a lot about looking after yourself so that you are actually able to leave a legacy. And this putting your own oxygen mask on first, however many times I hear it, so important for me to remember that I can't leave anything behind if I'm sort of, you know, struggling to sort of, you know, do the everyday. So that sort of resilience legacy thing has become quite a sort of a key thing for me. And I think in the context of the business, I want to leave the industry in a slightly, even just imperceptibly different, better place than I found it. And I think going back to this idea of when you realize what your passion is, and it took me a long time, like we're talking mid-30s, and a pandemic to actually really make me realize that what we're doing within the business is making a sector understandable from the outside. As I said, being that person that's prepared to stick their hand up in any meeting, boardroom or whatever, whether it's, I call it sort of boots on the ground to the boardroom, I'm that one asking the sticky questions. And I think this idea that as a business, a small but mighty business and an amazing team that I'm so proud of, they get the fact that we're not just, you know, sort of sorting out our clients' safety. We're not just finding great people for them and recruiting for them. We're not just giving them good advice. Actually, we're able to work with clients where every pound they spend with us is going to have some sort of impact. And I think more and more clients are working with us because I want this business to be able to not sort of boast about profit, because any business that's of our sort of size, and particularly facing the sort of governmental, potentially policy changes, we're all kind of, you know, quaking in our boots thinking, God, you know, what's coming next? But I think if you can have an attitude of where you can, looking at profit as something that should be reinvested, it's something that has really been a game changer for me in relation to this word legacy. So what are we doing about that? You know, I don't just want to ever bang on about stuff. I always want to do, I'm a doer. So putting money back into the industry for training, for people coming from professional sports background into security. I'm a huge, I love sports of any sort, but the idea that we can bring in a new dynamic, a new skill set into my industry, we're investing in that. The fact that we can bring a security industry together to help protect and to help advise, particularly where we're looking at domestic abuse and domestic violence charities. Imagine if the whole security industry donated protective time to those that can't afford it and that need it most. So watch this space, David Ward. So for me, legacy, and I would finish by saying, if anyone hasn't looked at the Ikigai model, it's a Japanese word, IKAGI. I have it on the home screen of my phone. In fact, my phone, I'll try and show it to you in a minute. It's where your passion, mission, vocation, and profession overlap. I think in the middle of that is the word legacy, alongside this sort of Ikigai, this meaning where you're living a life where you are pushing forwards. And for me, it's not about knowing where the next year is. God, I'm working month to month at the moment. There's lots of things that are happening in the sort of wider world that are sort of changing the course of where the business is going. But I, as a human, have never been more set about the fact that I want to leave something behind. And I think as a woman as well in business, I don't have my own children. I have lots of children around me. My partner has children. I am the godmother. You know, I have I think there's about 6 and counting now. I want to leave them something. I want to make them proud. And I think in this whole idea of family business, I'm, you know, absolutely bringing certain members of my family into what I'm trying to leave behind. Because I think that for me, and Anita, I know you this is a big thing for you, this idea of handing the baton back, helping others, bringing those younger generations along. And if that can be from within your own family, whether that's birth family, whether that's your family, your tribe around you, I think that's when I can look back and think, you know, brilliant. Yeah, like life well led, but that you can come to it late. And this is the thing that I think I'd always pressured myself during my sort of first career, if you like. There's nothing like setting a business up and then having a pandemic to make you realize your own sort of sense of self and where you're going.
Okay, thank you. That is so inspirational, and you know, you're just saying all the things I'm thinking, really. So thank you for that. Now, time is pressing. We've got 10 minutes. So, all right. So I want to move quickly on to, you know, this is all about women helping women, and particularly youngsters getting that first foot on, you know, on the ladder. And we have got some young girls on our gathering today. So, what advice would you give, Kate, to young people, young women, particularly in today's world, based upon your experience? What advice would you give them? And you know that they are, you know, they won't have confidence. They, you know, they're shitting themselves every time something happens. They think it's the end of the world. Whatever prevents them doing it. What advice would you give them?
So there's 3 things that are my sort of tenets to life is around network, training, and investment in yourself. And these are the 3 things. If I ever struggle, which I do, by the way, on an almost daily basis, there's always a moment of thinking, oh, you know, which way am I going? Actually, these 3 things. So your network, there is no excuse now not to have a network of sorts, whether it's the things you enjoy doing, the gym that you go to, the school that your children are at, social based through social media, and also offline, having a really good online and offline social network. Some of the people that are the biggest supporters for me on my Instagram, I've never met, but they bang my drum every single day. And I think if you've got a good crew around you, a good tribe around you, that is the start of being able to pick off the people you want as your mentors, your guides, and all the rest of it. The training piece, the second piece, I think, had I not done a bodyguard course, and I'm not, you know, obviously it'd be amazing if every single person on here went and did their close protection training. That would be a brilliant win. I'm not suggesting that we all have to go and, you know, do our Israeli martial arts, but this idea of, and then what I've learned from being around ex-elite sort of military and sport, is this idea of continuous learning. And it's CPD. Again, I don't like using acronyms, but continuous professional development. There are things in your career right now, and there are opportunities both within the business you're working in or on, that you can step outside of the day-to-day and say, right, I'm going to actually train in that particular thing. And I think that idea of continuous professional development ties in with the third thing, which is invest in yourself. And whether that's giving yourself the time. I saw a question about, I only saw this word stress a minute ago, but looking after yourself mentally and investing in your mental wealth is one of the key parts that I've discovered through the pandemic. Proactive mental health support. So I've done proactive cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm doing brain spotting at the moment, because I believe that a lot of the work that's being done with female athletes at the moment is centering around athletic performance and the work with trauma. So a huge fan of brain spotting. Look it up. It's an awesome technique. And getting to know yourself, the good, bad, and the ugly. Running a business is like holding up a mirror every day, and it's like, oh, I don't like that about myself. Oh, I'm all right at that. But every single day you have this mirror, and actually getting to know yourself in granular detail will enable you to build the best network around you, because you'll kind of be a bit more sure about the sort of people that make you feel good. Because people that don't make you feel good, there's 7 billion people. Pretty sure you can move on from that person and find another person that makes you feel good about yourself. But that sort of network training, investment in yourself, and I've got a metric for that, which is around about 10% of everything that comes in, I try and put into myself and by extension within the business, within my team, because the best way that you can kind of become more resilient, things like the mental health first aid course, every single person that comes into UMBRA does that. And not only does it help you look out for others, it actually it teaches you about the things that you can do to protect yourself. So that's probably where I would and don't have regrets. Failure is a blessing in disguise. Getting it wrong is getting it right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. It's fabulous talking to you. It's fabulous hearing about you, and also you're so normal. I think sometimes we sort of meet people, hear about people, and we just think there must be a cut above, or there must be something we can't reach or aspire to. But in my experience, every single woman that I've met is just really normal, and that's what's great about us. There's no ego, there's no pretense, and it's just very, very down to earth. Just be ourselves. And I think that one of the biggest things that you said, just a second, was invest in yourself, and that means surrounding yourself by positive people that can have a positive impact on you. There are too many people that are willing to tell you how you should do things and why you're doing it wrong, and don't bother. So thank you for that advice. That's great. Amali, we've got a few questions, haven't we?
Yeah, we have. Can I kick us off? Okay, so Joanna said, do you think that females can provide a more discreet protection service? Because typically men are seen as security, close protection, and females may be confused with things like domestic staff. Can that be an added value?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the sort of essence of when I was working and operational, and still am, is that you're not expecting a woman to be in that kind of role. What I would say is that you're as good as the team around you. So men, women, different cultures, different backgrounds. If you're working with a client from, say, a Middle Eastern family, then it makes sense to have a wide variety of people, so you can do different things. But that was really the light bulb moment that led to the Invisible Security TEDx talk, to be honest with you, because it's not just about how useful women are, it's what diversity brings to a protective team. And I've seen that firsthand and experienced it firsthand. And some of the best operatives that we work with are those that I literally was sort of shoulder to shoulder with from 2013 onwards. So yeah, great question. You're hired.
Question from Erica. Is there a sector or type of client that forms the majority of your client base? And also, I've seen male operatives protecting females, but would you have a female operative protecting a male client?
So I get asked this sort of the male-female thing a lot, actually. I mean, firstly, the clients that we work with range from entrepreneurs, captains of industry, C-suite, all the way through to clients from all over the world, but that will have some sort of UK base, so a UK asset that they own. So really wide variety of clients, male, female. And yeah, this is really interesting. And I think this is something that, again, in the TEDx, I sort of briefly touch on. I've been in environments where I am used as the person who is alongside the male client because of my PA and chief of staff background. I actually, it's more from a logistical point of view. I'm actually able to do the sort of logistical pieces of the puzzle, but also be that what we'd call that front party. And then I've got a team behind me or a team in front of me that are coming through after that client. So the short answer, yes, you would. Long answer goes back to the previous question, which is the best teams I've worked with are fully diverse, and that's backgrounds, neurodiversity, but also that look and feel when you're able to do things that, for example, myself and my head of security going and checking into a hotel, we're just a couple, whether we've all seen it perhaps when we're out and about, where there's sort of a bit of a frisson, particularly with more high profile people, where you can visibly see groups of guys. You've got the curly whirly, the sort of earpieces. There are easy ways of making sure that is not visible, and there are reasons why potentially those sort of types of security activity are happening, not least of which for deterrence, for things like different threats. You know, when you've got a client that has stalkers or fixated individuals, sometimes you actually need a visible presence, so it's obvious that it's not a good idea to attempt anything. I hope I answered that.
Okay, and last question from Genevieve. How do you deal with stress and maintain your own work-life balance? And do you feel that it's harder for women to maintain boundaries when it comes to prioritising our own well-being? No, sometimes.
Yeah, amen, Genevieve. So learning the word no is a very powerful word, and it's a very intuitive word. And I think women, particularly that I've met over the years, we know when we're just people pleasing and saying yes. There's an amazing Elizabeth Day How to Fail podcast with somebody who is a professional saying no person that everyone should listen to. It's very interesting. For me, as I said at the sort of tips bit, the pandemic has been a very useful way of me working out that the life I was leading before that, growing the business, was probably unsustainable. Lots of travel. I would say pick your partner wisely in life. It took me a long time to find the sort of person that would dare to deal with and be in a relationship with someone like me. But choosing your partner wisely, I think, is something that, and whether that's somebody that's in your family, whether that's, somebody who is your friend, because somebody that can just call you out, and we all should have that person where they can just say, Kate, are working too hard, or I think there is a problem here. And I have, again, various people in my life that can call me out on that sort of when they think I'm either going sort of a bit silent on them or not able to do the things that I would normally do. And I think particularly for women as well, we don't like talking about what happens when we hit 40. I'm telling you now, I cannot do the same things that I could do 2 years ago, both in terms of paddle the channel. Hell yeah. I mean, I don't even know how I did some of the things that I did physically, but also it's so important as women that we look at the sort of changing of the life, the sort of perimenopausal, and no one likes to talk about it, but my sister's talking about it a lot more now in her leadership development. But I think that women need to understand that stress has a different response with our different hormones, and we need to be really almost hypervigilant about it. And really carve out that me time and keep the me search going as well. Know yourself, know your resilience points, and for me, it's knowing when to switch off. And my partner is brilliant at that, and he knows when I am getting to the point of a bit of a sort of a manic moment, because I won't sit down and I will write his to-do list out, and he's like, "How about your to-do list? Where's that going?" And I will then know that that's the point where I need to just leave him alone and stop telling him what to do. I hope that helps.
My go-to inspiration for quotes is a wonderful lady, she's dead now, Maya Angelou. And one of the things she says about, where I've got them on my pinboard up here, is nothing will work unless you do. And that's so right. And darling, 60 is new 40. I'm 63, so shut up.
No,
but you're absolutely right. I can't do the things I used to, and I don't beat myself up about that. And also choosing the right partner, particularly when women are becoming more independent, they have more purpose, they want to do more things in their lives. They do have to think about the partner they choose that's going to give them the bandwidth to do that and not think it's imposing on them. So I think that's great advice. I was listening to a podcast around choosing a partner, and one of the things is, you know, if you've got that person, make sure they are in your corner, because we are always in their corner. Make sure they're in your corner. So I think that's two pieces of great advice that you've given us today, Kate.
And it doesn't have to be a partner. It can be, you know, I've had great right hand and supportive people around me, and it just so happens that now my actual sort of life partner, he's as you said, the banging of the drum every single day.
Oh yeah, completely. Well, it's 10 o'clock, so that's pretty good going. Thank you so much. You are amazing, wonderful. You've opened my eyes to other worlds where women perhaps hadn't thought of going into, but actually you're still a woman, you're still doing your thing, but you've got different sorts of skill sets, different sorts of training, but you worry. You know, you train yourself, you see prejudice everywhere, you've got mentors, you mentor others. So you're doing all the same things as we're all doing within our own ecosystem, really. So thank you so much for that. I just want to remind everybody that, you know, today is especially for women helping women, and for the Brilliant Breakfast, which are happening all over the country. So that's amazing. And so I want to thank you all for being here. We are connected now. So is everyone's okay? Can you give me a thumbs up if I can say that everyone here now is part of this little network, because then we can send each other all our details. And, you know, if you need somebody, then let's do that. You know what? You've got to give, haven't you, to get. So thank you so much. You are wonderful, amazing. I have to thank Rena Ranger for helping me not to say no, but to say yes. Don't ask me again, Rena, because I'm going to say no. And also something came up yesterday, and I think that everybody here can do this. And if you could write it down, it's called hashtag this little girl is me. All right, you've got to find a picture of when you were tiny. Mine was rubbish, but I put it up anyway. And my very, very dear friend Jackie Mallender did hers first, that inspired me. Tag your friends in, and it's just really a potted history of what it was like when you were young, what can you remember, your parents, how you got to be in, because I bet your bottom dollar, you know, everyone that you could ever think of that's been successful, that is successful, that loves life, etc., they didn't come from that place to start with. They did not come from that place to start with. And I think that is so inspirational for other people to know that you can come from zero to hero through your own efforts, and those of your friends and those that are in your corner. But actually, yes.
So you just know, ladies and gents, that you don't have to have a bowl haircut for your whole life. That is the moral of the story here. Good Lord.
But all of us as mothers gave our children bowl haircuts, okay? Mine have all had them. Okay, and then one of them got fed up and started cutting her own fringe, which was and then had to have a shorter bowl haircut. But yes, we all came from somewhere. We're on the planet for 80 years. We've got to do something worthwhile. You know, it is a gift. And you know, everyone has a purpose. Everyone has something to give. And really, we're here for the next generation of women that are also going to be there to change the world. A parting word? No, I think I love these three words: network, your training, and invest in yourself. You can't go wrong.